I married my best friend's sister 10 years ago, and our love story goes way back to our childhood. You could say we were childhood sweethearts. Our dating days were a mix of sweetness and bitterness because our relationship nearly strained my friendship with Jacob, her brother. Her name is Candice, and she's not just my girlfriend, she's been my crush since childhood, the one and only woman I've ever set my eyes on. I even considered her my soulmate until she chose to break that unspoken soul contract between us, and that decision shattered my life and had consequences for our daughter as well. Our married life had been going smoothly, and our love never waned. She always took care of me, and I reciprocated. We have a wonderful 6-year-old daughter together, and Candice is an excellent mother. She's kind-hearted and empathetic, which made it hard for me to suspect her of anything. I'm a lawyer, and my work often demands long hours in my office poring over case files. Despite my busy schedule, I've always made an effort to be there for her, making every moment special, just like the day I proposed to her 10 years ago, and she said a resounding yes. Candice works as an assistant manager in my brother's company. She's dedicated to her job, but that never stopped her from being a loving wife and mother. However, things took a turn when she got promoted to assistant manager at a different branch. Arguments became frequent, and she started coming home later than usual. I initially attributed it to the adjustment period, but my doubts and fears grew with each passing day. Candice came home completely intoxicated. Her friend had to drop her off because she couldn't even walk straight. Our daughter was already tucked into bed, so I helped Candice to our room while changing her clothes. Something caught my eye, a couple of big hickeys on her back and one on her shoulder. A wave of unease washed over me, and I couldn't help but feel anxious and have all sorts of thoughts racing through my mind. However, I tried my best to keep my composure, calm my racing thoughts, and not jump to conclusions. I decided to head to the living room and prepare for tomorrow's case, but no matter how hard I tried to focus, but those hickeys kept bothering me, and I couldn't stop wondering how she got them. After mulling it over, I made up my mind to talk to her the next day before she left for work. Her distant and irritable behavior had already been bothering me, and these marks on her body just added to my concerns. It was disheartening to think that after a decade of sweetness, our marriage might be going sour. The following day, as I was about to confront her, I noticed her phone was buzzing incessantly. It made me wonder who could be texting her so early in the morning. In all our years together, Candice never put a lock on her phone, but this time it was locked tight. Doubts began to plague my mind, and I found myself reflecting on our life together, our daughter, and everything we had shared. I put the phone back on her desk and proceeded to get ready for my case. While in the kitchen preparing breakfast for Candice and our daughter, I felt someone hugging me from behind. When I turned around, there she was, smiling and hugging me tightly. I embraced her back, though another detail nagged at my mind. Candice typically wore a delightful mix of rose and vanilla perfume, but today she smelled like men's cologne, and her hair had the faint scent of smoke, as if she had been around cigarettes. Despite her cheerful demeanor at the dining table, I couldn't help but feel uneasy, so I asked her what had put her in such a good mood. She told me she was happy because I made her breakfast, but I couldn't resist asking her about her whereabouts the previous night. Her smile faded, and she began apologizing, explaining that she had forgotten to inform me about a welcome party at her new office. She had intended not to drink but ended up having too much. Her demeanor shifted, and she seemed uneasy. Curiosity got the better of me, so I inquired about the mysterious hickeys on her back and when she started locking her phone. Her reaction was sudden and extreme. She stood up, clutching her hair in a frantic manner. Concerned, I rushed over to calm her down as she screamed and cried loudly. Her behavior frightened me. She accused me of being insensitive, claiming I didn't care enough to ask about the marks and jumped to conclusions about them being hickeys. She insisted they were cigarette burns she got at the club. It made sense, and I figured anyone in my shoes might have reacted similarly. Before I could voice my understanding, she explained that her phone password was set to my birth date due to work-related files necessitating a lock. After the heated argument, I headed to work, my mind racing with various possibilities. I wanted to confide in my brother James, but our marriage's privacy was a sensitive topic, and I didn't want to upset Candice further, so I decided to let it go. Candice's behavior had me on edge, and I couldn't shake off the suspicion. When I returned home, our daughter Lily was happily playing with her toys. However, in the bedroom, I overheard Candice giggling and engaging in a conversation that sounded flirtatious rather than fun. I approached the room and heard her ask, "How red is it?" I couldn't help but wonder what she was discussing. As soon as I entered the room, she abruptly ended the call and forced a fake laugh, clearly caught off guard. I inquired about the person she had been talking to, pretending to search for something. She casually dismissed it as just a conversation with a friend and left the room, leaving me with lingering doubts. Nope, it definitely wasn't just a friendly conversation. Something fishy was going on, and she was trying to manipulate me into thinking otherwise. That evening, she wore a backless top, and her hickey was right there, impossible to miss. It was dark and red, clearly not a burn. I love her, but I can't play the fool and let her deceive me like this. I can't help but continue to have suspicions. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I'll be honest, it's been tough for me ever since I saw those hickeys. My gut feeling was spot on, and I wasn't just overthinking things. Candice didn't stop her suspicious behavior. So one day, I decided to stay up and check her phone after she went to sleep earlier that evening. I was in the living room working, and she was glued to her phone for a solid 2 hours, looking anxious while texting someone. I didn't bother asking her because I knew she'd only lie to my face. About an hour later, she was sound asleep in our bedroom. Let me emphasize that we hadn't been intimate for a whole month now, even on the days I tried to initiate, but she claimed exhaustion. I didn't want to argue about it. As I was about to reach for her phone, it started buzzing with an unknown number calling her. I grabbed the phone and took it outside the room, answering the call myself. What I heard almost made me sick to my stomach. On the other end of the line was a woman screaming something that shook me to the core. She was yelling about how she'd finally found Candice's number and threatened to expose her affair with her husband from the office. My heart sank, but I composed myself and explained that I was her husband, trying to defuse the situation. This woman, named Jenny, turned out to be the wife of Matthew, a colleague of Candice's at work. She gave me her address and asked me to meet her as she had something important to share. I have to say, there's nothing worse than being betrayed by someone you vowed to spend your life with. All this time, I had hoped and prayed that my suspicions were wrong. I loved her, and the thought that on nights she rejected me, she might have been with her coworker, was devastating. The following day, I went to meet Jenny, and seeing her pregnant and younger than both Candice and me made me feel sympathetic. She was in her 8th month of pregnancy, and her eyes were brimming with tears. Strangely, I couldn't cry. Instead, anger was the only emotion. I could feel it. It was heart-wrenching to think that my wife was involved in such a cruel act against a pregnant woman. Jenny showed me some disturbing content on her tablet, explicit images and even a video of Candice and Matthew being intimate. She had obtained these from Matthew's phone the previous evening when they had a confrontation. It explained why Jenny had been texting anxiously the night before. I couldn't help but taste bile in my mouth, and tears streamed down my face. I asked Jenny to send me all the evidence and assured her that Candice would face the consequences for wrecking her marriage. Jenny mentioned she intended to file for divorce, but I suggested she wait a few days to fully savor the chaos Candice had caused. After leaving Jenny's place, I drove over to my brother's house. He's got 2 kids and has always been a wise advisor in my life. I ended up drinking quite a bit while sitting with him until I passed out. I woke up after 2 hours with a pounding headache, and my brother was sitting on the sofa, massaging my feet. Once I had a warm cup of espresso, he started asking me questions, and my head was still spinning. I handed him my phone and asked him to open the gallery to see what was inside. His expression turned to one of disgust, and he immediately placed the phone on the table. I shared the whole situation with him, and he provided me with additional information. Candice had been cheating even before her recent promotion. In her previous team, Matthew was her team leader, and it seemed like there might have been some connection between her actions and her desire for a promotion. I should also mention that one aspect of Candice's personality I forgot to mention earlier is her greed. She was never after money as she earned her own, but she had an invisible hunger for fame and higher positions. Given this, I wasn't entirely surprised if that was a motivating factor in her actions. James, my brother, owned the company, but he mostly worked from home because his wife, Rose, was half paralyzed. That's a whole different story though. Anyway, he's a fantastic brother and husband. I asked him why he hadn't told me any of this earlier. He explained that he had been conducting his own investigation into the matter and didn't want to act solely based on rumors. He lacked concrete evidence to support his case, so he decided to keep quiet. I drove back home, rehearsing how to act normal as if nothing had happened. When I entered, Lily rushed towards me, and I scooped her up, pretending to be all smiles. Candice walked over, kissed me on the lips, and cheerfully announced that she had made my favorite lasagna. I felt nauseated just thinking about it. Dinner was a challenge with her, and I was eager to put an end to this charade as soon as possible. To put it plainly, she's evil, a narcissist, and a master at gaslighting. Candice hugged me from behind. I turned to look at her, and she was wearing a red satin slip dress. She used to look beautiful, but today she appeared repulsive to me, and it was difficult to even glance at her. She asked if I had answered that call from last night. I immediately denied it. She pressed me again, assuring me that I could tell the truth without consequence, but I wasn't about to fall for her manipulative games. I disagreed once more and kissed her lips. I was following her trail of lies and gaslighting, leading her on. She pushed me onto the bed and whispered in my ear that Lily was already asleep. I asked her if she was feeling tired as usual. She looked at me in disbelief and declined. I put up a feeble resistance, but I eventually gave in. I did it partly to humiliate her later. It's going to hit her hard when she realizes that I already knew about her deceptions and how repulsive her actions were. It turned out to be the most passionate encounter we'd ever had, and I felt no guilt about how it would affect her. I waited until Candice fell asleep. Carefully, I removed my arm from under her head, left the room, and made my way to my office. There were 3 missed calls from James. I called him back, and he asked me to meet him tomorrow. Apparently, there was something he couldn't discuss over the phone. Standing in Lily's room, I gazed at her innocent face. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow towards Candice for robbing our daughter of her childhood and our happiness. Sleep eluded me as I pondered what awaited me next. I apologize for the delay in updating you all. I've been quite occupied with ensuring that my wife faces the consequences of her actions and finalizing the divorce proceedings. Instead of providing regular updates, I thought it best to wait until everything was sorted out. In the morning, I drove over to James, and he was at the company's office. He showed me something on his computer that left me stunned. On the screen were pictures of Candice with various men, including one from our school named Richard, who also happened to be her team leader, like I mentioned before. James had been conducting his own investigation, and he uncovered the fact that Candice wasn't just involved with Matthew but with several others as well. Employees had even confessed to James that Candice was rather promiscuous, often going to clubs with them. Candice had slept with Richard because he had promised to promote her to the position of assistant manager, which he did. She had also engaged in similar behavior with Matthew. James had recorded these conversations as evidence for the company's internal investigation. The company had strict no dating policies, and this revelation was going to result in many employees losing their jobs, including Candice. Candice had always possessed an attractive allure and knew how to use it to her advantage. James sent an email to the branch where Matthew and Candice were employed, essentially exposing their inappropriate activities. In the midst of this, I was feeling quite helpless and uncertain about what to do next. As soon as the branch received the email, Candice began calling me frantically. I reluctantly answered, and she implored me to return home immediately. I informed James about this and made my way home. Upon entering, I found Candice in tears. She rushed to hug me, but I refrained from reciprocating. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and mentioned losing her job without giving a clear reason. I probed further, and she began weaving a web of lies. I firmly pushed her away and confronted her, threatening to expose the video of her involvement with her colleagues on our TV screen, a video I had learned about from Jenny. She stared at me in disbelief and once again resorted to gaslighting, suggesting that my constant preoccupation with work had driven her to these actions. Just as Lily entered the room, Candice attempted to reach for her, but I halted her charade of faint concern for our daughter. I informed her that I had already initiated divorce proceedings and that her termination from her job was a direct consequence. I asserted my intent to gain custody of our daughter and ensure her well-being. Being a lawyer, I was confident in my ability to navigate the legal process effectively. Candice's emotions overflowed as she began sobbing, crying, and pleading with me, asking if there was anything she could do to make things right. Anger surged through me, and I questioned how she could even contemplate fixing anything when she showed no remorse for her actions. I reached out to James, requesting that he take Lily to his place so she wouldn't have to witness this painful ordeal. I couldn't help but feel sorry for my little girl. When she was born, I had been filled with hope for her future, and she had been blessed with 2 loving parents. Growing up with a single parent myself, I had always been determined to shield my daughter from experiencing the same hardships in her life. I inquired of Candice whether she wanted to inform her brother Jacob, who was also my best friend, about our situation, and she reacted with sheer terror. I handed her the divorce papers and urged her to sign them, putting an end to this painful chapter. Just as she was about to sign, a surprising turn of events unfolded. My mother, her parents, and her brother arrived, and it was Jacob who proposed a plan to hold Candice accountable for her actions. The house had been named after my daughter, so Candice had no claim to it except for her personal finances and savings. Her parents, who had once held affection for me, now looked upon her with disappointment and disgust. Jacob shared that his initial opposition to our marriage had been fueled by his foresight that Candice could potentially bring ruin to our family, a prediction that sadly came true. In the midst of it all, Candice's brother, who knew her all too well, and my mother, who had treated her like a daughter, tried to console her and wiped away her tears as I reviewed the divorce papers. I assured Candice that she could visit and even stay with Lily in our home, and I had no intention of taking our daughter away from her. Prior to this, I had already shown pictures to Jacob, although not the explicit ones, and to be honest, I had lost any respect I once had for Candice. While I might have forgiven her if her actions had been a one-time mistake, her prideful and continued misconduct had ultimately led to the downfall of our relationship. There were moments when I had been preoccupied and failed to take her out or spend quality time with her, but I had tried my best and learned from my mistakes. Regrettably, it seemed that my efforts had come too late. I had been blinded to her narcissistic tendencies, but I couldn't forget those 2 damning hickeys. Anyway, no matter what happened, it's something that can't be undone, and I can't help but miss the person she used to be. My mother offered me a place to stay for a while, but I declined. I told her that I'd be staying here, and from now on, Candice would live with me. Candice's parents were furious and didn't hold back their harsh words. They were highly respected professionals in their fields, and she had tarnished their reputation. On the other hand, Jenny, who had also gone through a divorce, moved to a different city to live with her parents. Life after the divorce was challenging to navigate, but the satisfaction of having made her lose her job remained a constant source of comfort for me. Seeing the aftermath of what transpired was tough for Lily, but she enjoyed spending time with her grandmother, engaging in activities like playing and coloring. She felt sad because, of course, the little one missed her mother. As for Candice, she embraced her newfound freedom to meet different men regularly. She visited Lily daily, but we hardly crossed paths because whenever she came over, I was already in my office. I occasionally caught glimpses of Matthew dropping her off for a week, and after that, it was someone else. These were not just platonic encounters, She exchanged proper kisses with them after getting out of the car. Had she always been like this? I was too blind to see it, and honestly, guys, I feel like I dodged a bullet. After 14 years together, I'm still in shock, and if it weren't for the breakdown in communication, I might never have uncovered the truth. It's been a month now, and I've been engrossed in my legal cases. We did encounter each other occasionally and exchanged greetings, but I can't shake this feeling of emptiness and sadness. I've even had to turn to medication for depression and anxiety. Candice, on the other hand, seems to be doing better than ever. She shows no remorse and continues with her actions. However, she does face occasional humiliation from mutual friends, which secretly satisfies me. In the end, though, I view her as a valuable lesson in my life, one that allowed others to see the real Candice behind her mask. Her parents have turned against her, and she struggles to find employment, facing nothing but humiliation from those who used to be our friends. Yet she remains stubbornly proud and continues her ways. Above all else, my only wish is for the best for my daughter, a happy childhood and a bright future filled with love. Alright, that was a fun story. My wife and I, both in our 30s, met during our college years. Experiencing love at first sight, it wasn't until our senior year when we ended up in the same thesis group despite attending a large school with different majors that kept us from crossing paths earlier. Although we hailed from different states, we shared a deep affection for the city our school was in, so we made plans to stay there after graduation. However, we decided against living together right after college because we feared it might strain our relationship. We continued dating as usual for a year following graduation before deciding to move in together. I never once doubted our relationship and knew she was the one I wanted to marry. At the age of 25, I proposed to her, which surprised many of our friends from school. Some doubted our lasting compatibility, perhaps due to the stark differences between us. I was introverted and quiet, while she was outgoing and occasionally boisterous. Her ability to effortlessly draw people in was one of the things I cherished most about her, and I never considered it an issue. After our marriage, we spent 12 years together, raising 3 children, owning a home, and making plans for retirement in a small Vermont town. In a decade, regrettably, my wife made a decision that shattered those plans. My wife worked as a marketing executive, holding a prestigious job that involved extensive travel and managing overseas clients for her firm. I always believed that our marriage had a strong foundation, so her business trips abroad never raised any concerns for me. She enjoyed sightseeing and had friends in various countries, but I never suspected infidelity during her travels. My suspicions didn't arise until I discovered a pregnancy test in our bathroom while she was away. After our 3rd child, we both agreed that we didn't want more kids. We explored our options and decided that the most cost-effective and least invasive method to prevent pregnancy was for me to undergo a vasectomy. So, I went through with it. Following the vasectomy, my wife ceased taking birth control, and everything seemed fine. However, when I stumbled upon a pregnancy test in the trash while cleaning my bathroom, it raised some concerns. Looking back, she had been exhibiting signs of morning sickness, but the fact that she needed to take that test implied she was at risk of getting pregnant, and I knew it couldn't have been by me. At the time I found the test, my wife was abroad, and she was on a 6-hour time difference from us. She had mentioned she was likely asleep when we last talked around 4 o'clock p.m. my time. Out of curiosity, I checked her location on my phone and noticed she wasn't at her hotel. Instead, it appeared she was at a restaurant in the heart of Stockholm. If she wanted to have dinner with a friend, she could have simply informed me, but instead, she lied about going to bed. I had a hunch that if she was deceiving me, she must have had something to hide. I entered her office and accessed her computer to check her emails. Fortunately, she had her login details inside her notebook. I thoroughly searched for any signs of an affair, and I found undeniable evidence. It appeared that she was involved romantically with a client she had been on a work trip to visit. As I combed through the emails, I discovered exchanges of pictures and updates about their personal lives. The message thread I stumbled upon dated back 3 years, but it seemed there were even more messages before that. They shared information about their families and future plans. Some messages seemed very friendly, while others were extremely explicit. I did some investigation and managed to identify the guy. I already knew he was a client, but what I didn't know was that my wife had met him while studying abroad in college, and they had stayed in touch ever since. She had known him even before she met me. Both of them continued with their respective lives, families, and jobs, but whenever the opportunity arose, they would meet for intimate encounters. I spent the entire night delving into the extensive history they had together, trying to piece everything together. It devastated me. I loved my wife more than anything, and she had kept such a significant secret from me all this time. I felt like I didn't even know the person I was married to, and I wanted out of the relationship. There was no way. I couldn't stay with someone who could lie the way my wife did. In the morning, I immediately got in touch with a divorce attorney and sent them all the documents I had gathered, including screenshots from my wife's computer. In addition to what I had already uncovered, I stumbled upon some intriguing business secrets between my wife and her affair partner that I thought her boss should know about. Essentially, her trips abroad were completely unnecessary. She was creating fake trips at work and using company funds to pay for them. I found private conversations where she and the other man planned their rendezvous and came up with plausible excuses for work. It was just another layer of deceitfulness on my wife's part. I didn't confront my wife about it when I discovered everything. Instead, I decided to wait until she got home. However, when she texted me before her 13-hour plane ride back home, I had a sudden idea to expose everything to her while she was blissfully unaware. I reached out to her boss and forwarded all the evidence to him. He was shocked by the information and told me that he would discuss it with others to gather more information. I packed a few bags for myself and the kids and headed to my mother's house. We wouldn't be at home when my wife returned later that day. I put my kids to bed and eagerly awaited the phone calls from my wife as she realized exactly what was happening. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I received dozens of text messages and calls from her, insisting that we needed to talk. She asked where I was with the kids, and all I did was respond that I was divorcing her and the kids were safe with me and their grandmother. She ended up coming over to the house demanding to see the kids while they were asleep, causing a big scene. I showed her the kids so she knew they were okay, then I told her she had to leave. I advised her to get a divorce attorney and be prepared for whatever her boss had in store for her. She told me that I had no right to go through her personal belongings the way I did, and she planned on filing a lawsuit against me. I wasn't sure how something like that would hold up, but I figured I would discuss it with my divorce attorney anyway. From what I understand, something similar happened with her partner abroad. I sent information to his employer about the misuse of company time and funds. I didn't know them personally, but I followed his wife on social media to see if there were any updates. She did end up leaving him. I proceeded with the divorce, and my wife put up quite a fight in the courtroom. There weren't any grounds for her to sue me in any way. On top of the divorce, her former employer filed charges against her for embezzlement of company funds. It seems like she'll be facing a hefty fine, but she likely won't have to serve jail time. However, the embezzlement lawsuit worked in my favor during the custody hearing. Now, I'm living a happy life without her. It was painful at first and it took a lot of adjustment, but I now realize that she wasn't the person I thought she was. The woman I married would never have treated me the way she did. I'm relieved that I discovered her true nature and left her when I had the opportunity. My wife and I were married for 8 years, and we had 2 children together. I had a deep love for her and would have gone to great lengths to make her happy. However, she ended up tearing our family apart. We initially met through a dating app and began seeing each other shortly after matching. We had so much in common and we clicked right from the start, so it made sense to explore where our relationship could lead. Things took a serious turn when she became pregnant with our first child. The news seemed to accelerate our relationship, but neither of us was upset about it. We were excited and deeply in love. My wife gave birth to our beautiful daughter, and we couldn't have been happier. After the birth of our daughter, we decided to get married and eventually settled into a nice house. The order in which we did things may have been unconventional, but it appeared to work out for us, or so I believed. The first few years of our marriage were challenging. We had only been dating for about 6 months when she became pregnant, so we didn't really know each other that well at the time. We weren't even living together. Our close proximity highlighted many personality differences between us. I was always outgoing, extroverted, and full of energy, wanting to seize every opportunity and experience life to the fullest. My wife, on the other hand, was reserved and enjoyed relaxation at times. I felt like I had too much energy for her to handle. We occasionally had arguments, but we always resolved them amicably and moved forward. I believed that effective communication was a strong aspect of our relationship. In situations where we couldn't immediately resolve an argument and one of us was upset, my wife would go to her sister's house and spend the night. I knew she needed a chance to vent and express her feelings, and the next morning she would return, and we would have a conversation. All these feelings became more pronounced after the birth of our second child. Let me be clear, I adore my son more than anything, but dealing with a newborn was incredibly challenging. He would stay awake all night crying, and it took hours to get him to fall asleep. The entire household was sleep deprived and constantly on edge during the first month after bringing him home. Fortunately, we eventually figured out how to soothe him and restore some normalcy. I hate to say this because it might sound like a toxic stereotype, but my wife stayed at home to care for the kids and worked 70 hours a week. Often, when our son was crying, I prioritized getting as much sleep as possible for work. I had assumed my wife would primarily take care of him. Many months had passed since this was an issue, and I didn't even realize it was something my wife was still holding on to. It was a grudge she had against me unbeknownst to me, and she couldn't let it go. One night, we had a trivial argument, and she brought up all the past issues. She used it against me, making me feel like a neglectful father and a bad partner for not tending to our crying son at night. I defended myself, explaining that I had to work and the exhaustion was affecting my performance. I also pointed out that I frequently helped with our daughter, so I couldn't understand why she couldn't see my perspective. She was very upset and eventually stormed out, leaving me to take care of both kids for the night. I fulfilled my responsibilities and waited for her to return in the morning, thinking we would discuss it as we always did. The following day, she returned much later than usual, causing me to miss work due to her actions. It seemed like she genuinely didn't care about my time or how her actions affected me. We talked around noon, and she was overly apologetic, as if she wanted to avoid further discussion and bring an end to the matter. After our conversation, she went to see the kids, and we didn't bring up the issue again. Over the next couple of months, her behavior changed significantly. She seemed happier and more energetic, and I couldn't pinpoint the reason behind this newfound enthusiasm. While she used to visit her sister once or twice a week during that time, it seemed like she was going there every other day. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in hindsight, I understand why she was going there. Sometimes she would take the kids with her, and other times she would ask me to watch them while she went alone. I discovered the truth when I witnessed her sneaking out of bed one night to take a call. It seemed she forgot to put her phone on silent before going to bed because her ringer woke me up. She answered the call before I could ask her what was going on, and she whispered for the person on the other end to hold on before slipping away from me immediately. I found this situation strange. It was unusual for her to receive a call in the middle of the night, and even more so for her to answer it and sneak away. I remained still, pretending not to notice, and waited for her to leave. After a minute, I quietly left the room to investigate. I heard noises coming from the laundry room, so I pressed my ear to the door to try and listen. I could hear someone on speakerphone instructing my wife to engage in intimate activities, and my wife appeared to be enjoying them. She had secretly gone to have phone intimacy with someone else. I listened for a couple of minutes while it continued. Both participants were whispering and trying to be discreet, indicating that they were engaging in something they shouldn't have been. I contemplated bursting through the door to confront them, but I decided to handle it differently. So, I returned to the bedroom and pretended to go back to sleep. She didn't return for about half an hour. I stayed up, waiting until I could hear her snoring beside me. Then, I got out of bed and took her phone with me into the kitchen. I checked her most recent call and found it was from a familiar name, her sister's boyfriend. Her sister, her closest friend in the world, had been in a 5-year relationship with her boyfriend, and she was deeply in love with him. Her sister believed he was the one, someone she wanted to marry and start a family with. As shocked as I was by my wife's infidelity, the fact that she was cheating on me with her sister's boyfriend made it even more devastating. I couldn't believe it. I went through their text messages and saw them planning times to meet up when her sister wouldn't be at home, exchanging pictures and videos. I was furious and wanted to expose her. I took numerous screenshots and saved videos, sending them all to myself. Afterward, I returned her phone to the bedroom and went to the living room to sleep for the night. I couldn't bear to be around her. I called in sick for work the next day and went to a cafe where I searched online for a divorce attorney. I found one and scheduled a meeting with them as soon as possible to end my marriage. Additionally, I wanted to inform her sister about everything before my wife had a chance to manipulate the situation and make it seem like I was lying. I drove to the restaurant where her sister worked and waited for her shift to end. When I saw her in the parking lot, I got her attention and asked if we could talk. She appeared confused and a bit nervous, but she joined me in my car. I disclosed everything I knew to her, showing her the videos and screenshots I thought she could handle. She was devastated by it all. Her sister was supposed to be the person she trusted most in the world, but instead, she had broken that trust. She was extremely upset. After she composed herself, I asked her what she wanted to do, and she immediately said she was kicking her boyfriend out of the house. She became angry as she talked about it. I hadn't realized that he didn't have a job and wasn't contributing to the rent. He was essentially a financially struggling SoundCloud rapper. I ended up driving her to her house and stayed there with her while she broke up with her boyfriend, kicking him out of the house and tossing his belongings out of the window. Her boyfriend seemed like he wanted to confront me physically, but he didn't make a move. If he had, I probably would have sent him to the hospital. After all of that was resolved, she and I returned to my house, where we both confronted my wife. My wife attempted to defend herself by claiming that the videos I had were manipulated, and that I was trying to sabotage her, though I couldn't fathom why I'd want to do that. Her arguments held no merit. I informed her that I wanted her to leave the house and that I was going to initiate divorce proceedings. She began crying, pleading for forgiveness, and asserting that it had just happened one day when she was upset with me. She tried to shift blame onto her boyfriend, suggesting that he took advantage of her vulnerability and tried to seduce her. While he may have been sleazy enough to attempt such a thing, it didn't absolve my wife from her own actions. If he made advances, she could have pushed him away and then informed me and her sister. Instead, she engaged in an affair that persisted for several months. Now, I have divorced my wife, and I have full custody of the children. The pivotal factor in this decision was her bringing the kids along during her affair, which did not sit well with the judge. Her sister has completely severed ties with her, and from what her sister has shared, much of their family has also cut off communication with my wife. I still maintain a relationship with her sister because she is my children's aunt, and she loves them. It wouldn't be fair to exclude her from their lives. Ultimately, I'm relieved to have discovered my wife's true nature. In hindsight, our relationship didn't seem like a good fit, and now both of us are free from that relationship. I wish it could have ended differently, but I believe everything happens for a reason, even if the journey was rockier than I would have preferred.